Hi there and welcome once again. This is Jennifer McGuire, and I hope your week is off to a great start. Today I am sharing with you 5 ways to use DIY foam stamps. So I will show you how to use simple craft foam and your dies to create your own stamps. And then I will show you 5 different ways you can use those stamps on your card. Now, this is such a great way to get more from your dies by turning them into stamps. And I'm always amazed at how well these DIY foam stamps actually stamp on your cardstock. So I have a bunch of examples for you today, but remember you can do this technique with any dies that you may have. Let's start with this example where I show different ways of using background stamps that you create yourself from background dies. For all of today's techniques, you need inexpensive craft foam. There are different types out there, different thicknesses and qualities. I'll link to the one that I use, but most should work great for this technique. I'm using the new Hero Arts Leaves and Vines background die. I really like the design of this, and I can use it for lots of different things. I'm going to run it through my die cut machine with a piece of craft foam. I'm using the Spellbinders Platinum 6, but any die cut machine should work. I find that most craft foams, as long as they're not too thick, die cut wonderfully. It just cuts like butter. It's amazing how well you can cut even the most detail of dies. So I'm going to take all the little pieces out of this die cut, and I'm actually going to use this as a stamp. What I like to do is put a little bit of adhesive on the back of the die cut, and then use it in my MISTI stamping tool. You can use an acrylic block for this, or leave the stamp that you created on your work surface, ink it up, and then press your paper on it. Either would work fine. Now I put a little bit of adhesive on the back of it, not much, just to hold it onto the door of my stamping tool, since there's nothing there to make it stick. Okay, now it's time to ink it up. I find that lots of inks work for this. I'm using Hero Arts Shadow Inks today, which are dye inks. Dye inks work wonderfully. You'll notice that I didn't even really ink up my stamp that I created all that well, but it still stamps great because of the give that the foam stamp has. One thing to keep in mind is this foam is a little bit thinner than clear stamps that we normally use. So I actually put a few extra pieces of cardstock under the one that I wanted to stamp on, just to raise it up a bit. And that will give you complete coverage of your foam stamp. Okay, so I've got a few stacked up in there. I've inked this up with a different green color. Stamp it once and look how beautiful that stamps. So you can create your own stamp out of any die that you have using craft foam. Here I decided to do a tone-on-tone look. Forgot to put some extra cardstock behind there. Put that in and look at the great results. Okay, let's use a couple of these backgrounds creatively on cards. I wanted to show you 2 different ways. Here I have die cut 3 of that Leaves and Vines background die from green cardstock and glued them all on top of each other for some dimension. Now I'm going to glue it on top of our stamped background, but slightly offset. So it creates the look of a shadow behind our die cut. It's kind of hard to see in the video, but here I'm going to do a comparison so you can see the difference it makes. On this one here, we have the stamped image in the background, so it peeks out from the side because I offset it a bit. And then this other one that I'm going to hold up is just the same die cut, but on white cardstock without the stamping behind it. See how it gives a lot more dimension to it on the example where we stamped? Now here's another example. This time, instead of doing the offset, I'm actually going to rotate the die cut that I put on top. So we just have lots of layering. So we have leaves in the background that we stamped, and then the die cut leaves we added on top. So we have 2 backgrounds we created here that give a shadow layering look, one with the offset and one by rotating. On both of my cards, I used the Hero Arts Thanks a Bunch Monkey stamp set. This is a new one that's really fun to use. I went ahead and stamped and colored and die cut the different images and added them onto my card. I also stamped a little sentiment onto a die cut circle and added that on top too. I really like that little bit of darker green that peeks out because we offset our die cut. If you wanted it to stand out more, you could use a darker color of green. Now here's the card that I made with the same stamp set, but using the background where we rotated the die cut for a layered look. This one is a little bit busier looking. If you wanted to soften it up or make it more subtle, you could have done your stamping with a lighter green ink, or you could even use like a soft gray. By the way, on my envelopes for these cards, I did stamp on them so they would match. I used the fun new Hero Arts Jungle background stamp. This is a great background that would work with a variety of different floral images on your cards, or for the playful animal ones that I did today. Okay, next I wanted to show you that you can use your DIY foam stamps to create reverse stamped images or mirror images. Because remember, we're die cutting from craft foam, we could stamp with either side of that craft foam. This time I'm using the Hero Arts Jungle Frame die. This is actually 2 pieces, so you can die cut it with or without that rectangle frame. I decided to keep them together, and I cut it from craft foam. So now I could stamp with either side of this. I decided to stamp with the back side of it so that I end up with the reverse of the die cut that I'm going to add on top. I thought that would be a fun way to create like a layered look and some extra interest in the middle area there. So once again, I'm putting a little bit of adhesive onto my craft foam die cut piece, and I'll add that into my MISTI stamping tool. Remember, if you don't have a stamping tool, you can use a large acrylic block, or just lay this piece down on your desk, ink it up, and then press your cardstock onto it. So this time I'm going to use a super soft ink. This is Hero Arts Soft Green ink, and I'm inking up my foam stamp. You can see you don't even need great coverage to get a great result. I have my little magnet at the center of my card. And what I didn't realize is that because the craft foam is thinner, that magnet is thicker and it won't let all of the image stamp. So I removed the magnet and now I'll stamp again. And this time you'll see that all the parts stamp nicely. So I went for a very soft look on this background. You could go for more interest or more contrast by using a darker ink if you wanted. I used the same die to cut from Hero Arts Pesto cardstock to layer on top, but I wanted some dimension behind it. So I once again cut from craft foam. This is another great use of craft foam, is to use it for dimension on your cards. Now that I think about it, I could have recycled the one that I used to stamp on and glued it behind the cardstock one, but I didn't think of it at the time, but that's a great way to use it more than once. After gluing that to my card, it's time to add some images to the inside. This time I'm using the Hero Arts My Monthly Hero Kit for June. This is a really unique kit. I'm liking that Hero Arts comes up with a different look each month, so I don't feel like I'm stamping the same cards every time. This has that fun, large jungle theme stamp set that's 6x8. That's a huge stamp set. There's also all the coordinating dies, a fun stencil, little watercolors, which I didn't use in this video, but would be great with these images, and a new Hero Arts Intensified black ink. It's like the Hero Arts Intense ink, but even darker, and I'll use it a little bit later. On this card, I'll be using that elephant image. I thought to go along with the elephant, I would use the older Hero Arts Huge Thanks stamp set. You can see the set there on the left. I stamped the sentiment into the open area on the card. And now I'm adding an elephant that I stamped, colored, and die cut. And I'm just tucking that in behind the leaf border die cut. Next, I took 2 large dies from the Hero Arts Rectangle Infinity die set. I ran them together through my die cut machine with white cardstock to create this thin white frame, and I glued it around the edge of my card. I felt that gave a nice finishing touch to the card design. Again, I stamped an envelope to match, so I like to put a piece of scrap cardstock underneath the flap of the envelope, put that into my stamping tool, ink up my background stamp, and stamp it onto the flap. This is another new background stamp, and it goes nicely with the jungle theme. I know that it takes a few extra minutes to stamp on your envelope, but it's a great way to make everything match. So here is my finished card. I added a little bit more color to the top of my elephant, and then I added some jewels onto the leaf area. You can see the stamping that I did in the background by creating a reverse image using the back side of my craft foam die cut. I used a very soft ink. I wanted it to be subtle. But if you wanted it to stand out more, you could do some sort of embossing or use a darker ink. This is a great way to get more out of those craft foam stamps that you create using your dies by stamping with the other side so you get a reverse or mirror image. Okay, the third fun way to use your own foam stamps is to create new shapes. So you can alter your craft foam that you've die cut to get new looks. So you can get more than one stamped image out of one die. I'm again using the background die that I used on my first example in today's video. This time I'm cutting from craft foam. It's a smaller piece because I'm just going to cut out one of the leaves from this die cut shape. Craft foam die cuts beautifully and also cuts beautifully, so it's easy to trim it down to whatever shape that you want. After I cut this one out, I also cut out 2 different leaf shapes from craft foam. This is an example that is good for using up your craft foam scraps too, because you can cut out small little shapes. So I'm putting a little bit of adhesive on the back of this leaf, putting it into my MISTI stamping tool, inking it up with Hero Art's soft olive ink and stamping that down. Now I'm going to switch out and use some of the other leaves that I die cut and use other colors of Hero Art's shadow inks. I used soft green, lime green, and green hills from Hero Arts. But remember, you could use any dye inks for this. Even pigment inks will work. You can see how you can get beautiful coverage by stamping with foam. Another thing that I don't show in this video, but I wanted to mention, is you can add multiple colors of ink to a craft foam image and stamp it to get a blended look, and it really works well. Okay, so I repeatedly stamped those different images onto the background of my card, and you can see how I let them overlap. I used softer color inks for a subtle look. Then I added a flamingo from the Hero Arts My Monthly Hero Kit from June, and then stamped a sentiment and added some little gemstones. I think this technique of cutting out your own shapes is a great way to get more from your dies. I wanted to show you the stamp set that I got the Hello Beautiful from. I didn't get a chance to use this set in today's video. I really like those tigers, but I used the Hello Beautiful, and I also like the sentiment that says you are magnificent. So I wanted to show you that one. Okay, now it's time to move on to my fourth idea for using your own foam stamps, and that is to create coordinating layers for your regular stamped images. I have a couple examples using this technique. For these, I used the Hero Arts Tropical Flowers stamp set. I actually didn't use the flowers and only used the leaves on these cards. I'm a big fan of leaf stamp sets, so I really like this one because I find you can use them for a variety of style of cards. So I have some white cardstock that I'm putting into my MISTI stamping tool. I also use the coordinating dies for the Tropical Flowers stamp set to cut from craft foam. Now I'm arranging these craft foam pieces in my MISTI, putting the adhesive on the top of them, and positioning them to cover my cardstock, but we want that adhesive facing up. I'm putting them kind of close together but not touching, and I want to get them to fit together as best as possible. Once I have them all positioned with adhesive on the top, I press my MISTI door onto it, and that transfers all of those craft foam shapes onto the door. And now we can do our stamping. I ink this up with Hero Arts soft green ink and stamp that onto my cardstock. And look at the beautiful result that we get. And since I've got these arranged, I can do a bunch of backgrounds at once. So I decided to do 2 that are soft green ink on white cardstock so that I have one for later. But then for my third example, I decided to stamp with a darker green ink on green cardstock. I really like the tone-on-tone look of this. Okay, now it's time to add our stamped images on top, now that we've finished all of our backgrounds. So I'm taking the stamps and lining them up with the coordinating die cuts that we stamped, so they match up perfectly. So I arranged several of them in here, close the door of my MISTI, and now I'm going to stamp with the darker green ink onto this background. I'm going to change up the different colors of inks each time. This time I started with Hero Arts Lime Green. Next, I can move on to my second panel and stamp the same on that. I am double stamping just to make the ink a little bit darker so it shows up more. Remember that Hero Arts dye inks kind of pull back or kind of smooth out and soften as they dry. Okay, now for our green background, this time I'm going to gold heat emboss. Using my anti-static powder tool, then I'll stamp the images with VersaMark ink. And by the way, I did clean off my stamps first. After I've stamped this, I can go ahead and add some gold embossing powder and then heat set that with my heat gun. Now I can remove all of those stamps and move them to new locations, lining up with other images that we stamped on the background. So I'll continue to do this until all of my backgrounds are covered, and we end up with the two that have lots of green inks, and then the one that is green with the gold embossing on top. Okay, so let's start turning these into cards. For one of the green backgrounds, I decided to add images from the Hero Arts Hello Toucan stamp set. This is really clever, fun images to color, and some clever sentiments. I decided to try out that new Hero Arts Intensified Black ink that's included in the June kit. I was really happy with the results because it's a super black ink, so it's super dark. And this ink is safe to use with my Copic markers. I don't have to worry about it bleeding. There you can see the great dark image you get. Okay, so off screen, I colored in my little images with Copic markers, and then I used the coordinating dies to cut them out. I added those pieces onto a white rectangle where I stamped a sentiment that is super clever. And I stamped that with the same intensified black ink, and you can see how nice it looks. I added that onto our green layered background. So with this technique, I show how you can use your coordinating dies to die cut from craft foam to create stamps that you can layer with the matching stamped images. Now for the green background with the gold embossing, I kept it very simple. I added a white rectangle where I stamped Love and Thanks from the Hero Arts Tropical Flowers stamp set. Now that gold leaf that you see there, I die cut from cardstock using that Leaves and Vines background die, and I cut out one of the leaves. I then covered it with 3 layers of gold embossing powder, and I felt like that was the perfect simple embellishment for this card. You can see how the gold embossed leaf matches the gold embossing on our background. And there's that background where we stamp tone on tone with the coordinating DIY stamps, and then gold heat emboss the matching stamped images on top. Okay, we're on to our 5th idea, and this is to create matching backgrounds. What I decided to do was create a focal image, then use the coordinating die to create my own foam stamps to create a subtle matching background. This features the Hero Arts Layering Palm Tree stamp set. I decided to go with one palm tree with a monkey hanging from it, but you could do 2 palm trees and put the little hammock between it and then stamp Take It Easy. I think I'll do that on my next card. Okay, so I used the coordinating die of the palm tree and I stamped that from craft foam and I added it into my MISTI. So we're ready to do our stamping. Now I'm going to ink that up with Hero Arts Soft Green ink. I once again went for a light color for a soft background, but you could go darker if you wanted. I'm stamping that onto my white cardstock that I have in my MISTI, and then I'm going to move my cardstock over, and I decided to move it over 5 squares. Now the reason I kept track of how many squares I moved it over is so that I could stamp my trees perfectly spaced out in the background. You totally don't need to do that, and it probably would look better if it were a little more random, but I decided to try this. So now I'm going to move it 5 more squares to the right and then stamp it again. You can see how this creates a nice overlap look. Now for the last 2 palm trees, I'm actually going to have my cardstock hanging out of the MISTI. That's okay to do. It'll still work great. Now we got to return to the top here and move 5 squares in the other direction. It will again be hanging outside of the MISTI, but that's okay. So now we have a subtle background that will match our focal image. I die cut that same tree from white cardstock and I have the negative space in my MISTI. In the opening, I've lined up the first layer of the top of the palm tree. I'm putting the die cut into the opening and then stamping that down with Hero Arts Lime Green ink. Now I'm coming in with the second layer and I'll stamp this with a darker green ink, which happens to be Field Greens. I like doing this technique of using the die cutting first and then stamping. I find that I get better results, especially when I'm doing layered stamping. Now it's time to stamp the 2 layers of the trunk of the tree. I use soft brown ink and Hero Art's Cup of Joe. I like how realistic this tree looks after doing that bit of stamping. I wanted to create kind of a soft grass look at the bottom of the card, so I'm taking my various green inks and just dragging them along the edge very lightly. This all layers together and gives a nice ground look and a super fast way to create the look of grass. I like to use the edge of the ink pad and also the corner just to get a little bit of variety. Okay, I then assembled my card by die cutting 3 extra trees from white cardstock, and I glued that behind our main one to give it some dimension. I also stamped the little monkey that's in this same stamp set, and I stamped a sentiment from the Thanks a Bunch monkey stamp set that I used earlier in this video. And I add all of that onto a white note card. You can see that by using the matching coordinating die to create a foam stamp, I'm able to create a matching background for our focal point image. Okay, so there are 5 different ways to use stamps that you create yourself with craft foam and dies. I hope this shows that there are many ways to do this, and you can use a variety of dies to do so. If you are interested in the supplies that I use, I always link them to multiple sources below in my YouTube description. And in the middle here are a couple other videos with related techniques that might be helpful to you also. I appreciate the time you spend with me. I hope you have the best week ever, and we'll see you soon.